Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. The couple in the glass. The first time she saw them, she didn't think too much of it. Just an exceptionally attractive, well-dressed couple having dinner together in their multi-million-dollar penthouse while overlooking downtown Chicago. Bev Thomas watched them from the balcony of the apartment, hidden away in the shadows of the night, wondering what it must be like. The apartment she was currently cleaning for work was cherry enough, but nothing compared to the place these two lived in. She'd studied them, admired them, became invested in them. But never once did it occur to her during that first sighting that anything was wrong. The woman wasn't just beautiful. She was elegant. Elegant in the way that women just weren't anymore. Audrey Hepburn, Grace Kelly, Jackie Kennedy, women who embodied class, charm, and fashion. The woman in the window looked as though she belonged on that same list, regardless of the fact that she was completely unknown to Bev. She wasn't a celebrity, wasn't an actress or a singer, and Bev didn't recognize her from the world of politics. She was just a stunning, refined, angelic individual who looked as though she'd descended from heaven itself to grace the earth with her beauty. She wore a ball gown of sorts, pale yellow, and doused in what Bev could only imagine were real diamonds from the way the material shimmered. Bev couldn't help but allow the jealousy to set in. How could one person have it all? If her looks weren't enough, there was the man seated across from her. He was unrealistically handsome. She was convinced he'd had work done to make him look that way, like he'd just arrived from a factory somewhere. But inside, she doubted it. Something about his face told her it was all natural. He landed somewhere between Paul Newman and Henry Cavill. From the Newman side came the piercing blue eyes, so deep in color that Bev could see them clearly from the balcony across the boulevard. The stubble of a full beard gave him the timeless, rugged quality. But then came the Cavill features. A strong, chiseled jaw, a full head of wavy auburn hair, and a physique that looked as though Michelangelo had risen from the dead and carved it himself. Bev's life could have stayed perfectly normal if it had only been that one time. But it hadn't. She cleaned that apartment 5 nights a week for an owner that was in town once a year, and every single night she found them in that exact same spot, just looking at each other. The second time, she found herself talking out loud about it. After all, it was just her. The walls weren't going to be critical of her self-monologue. The hell are they doing? Every night? She whined as she dusted away at the shelving and priceless decor. If I had money like that, I'd never cook another thing ever again. Then it occurred to her, and she nodded to herself at the realization. Probably a personal chef brings the 5-star menu to their front door. Unbelievable. She watched them as they ate, trying to imagine what the steak and asparagus tasted like when you were that well off. But from what she could tell, they didn't seem to enjoy it all that much. Probably eat like royalty so much that the glamour wore off, she'd thought. She'd forced herself to ignore them after that for the entirety of the second night. It was when she arrived for her shift on the third evening that the situation started to feel off. Something just wasn't quite right about them. Third night in a row, and there they were, seating by the window, candle-lit dinner and champagne. It was like watching someone's anniversary on a loop. That night, she didn't ignore them. That night, she actually moved a chair from the other side of the living room to the window where she could make herself comfortable as she stalked. She began to realize small details about them. Their clothing had changed, but their expressions were exactly the same. Stoic. As she watched their rendezvous unfold, she noticed that neither of them took a single bite of their meals or a solitary sip of their wine. Odd. Then there was Prince Charming's facial hair. The stubble had been there to begin with, but now the shadow of a budding neck beard was now showing. He hadn't shaved in a few days. It wasn't all that peculiar, but something about the couple told Bev that these weren't the kind of people who let hygiene go unattended. It was like the thing in the photo, not like the others. As she studied their faces, she noticed that they both looked exhausted, like they hadn't slept much. The final observation she made was that they never moved from those seats. When they did shift in place or push food around on their plates, their movements were subtle, almost careful. It became almost irritating for Bev. At first, she'd enjoyed daydreaming about what their world must be like, but now the show was becoming a bore. She moved the chair back to its spot on the other side of the room and ignored them as best she could for the rest of her shift. But when she returned for the 4th and 5th night that week, she found them there still, staring at each other and never moving. Saturday and Sunday she had off, but her mind was completely occupied by that couple across the way. It bothered Bev so much that Monday morning she decided to do a little detective work. She didn't have names to go on, so she went about finding them out. She made calls, did some internet searches, even sorted through city and county records to get any information that she could. It took her most of the day, but she finally found something. The penthouse on the 42nd floor on the left-hand wing belonged to a man named Doug Allen. He was some sort of financial wizard and had obtained an enormous amount of wealth day trading. From what Bev could tell, he'd never been married. Must be a girlfriend, she thought. But then she called the front desk of the building the penthouse was in and discovered that Mr. Allen hadn't used his personal entry sensor or code in over a month. When she went in to clean the apartment that night, they were there again, sitting by the window, looking like a set of puppets. It was too much for Bev. She was too invested. She made her way across to their building and waited outside until a stranger walked in, walking in behind them and onto the elevator as if she belonged. Thankfully, the ladies at reception were fully engaged in a conversation about the latest episode of Yellowstone and hadn't noticed. When she arrived on the 42nd floor, she found herself in a hallway that offered only 4 options. 1 penthouse door for each wing of the building. She approached their door and immediately noticed the "Do Not Disturb" placard that hung beside it. She was so nervous, she was shaking. But this couple had completely polluted her days and nights. She had to know what was going on if she ever wanted to get back to reality. She didn't know what she would say when they answered, but she decided she would figure it out as she went. She knocked once with the intention of doing it a second and third time, but when her knuckles connected with the door, it inched open slightly. It hadn't been properly latched. She looked at the opening for over a minute, trying to decide what to do. Clearly, they hadn't heard the knock, as no one came to the door to confront her. Surprising even to herself, she was actually considering letting herself in just enough to get a glimpse. She decided against the idea initially, but as she reached for the knob to close the door, she couldn't help herself. She shifted it open a little further, just enough to see inside. There was a small table in the center, and on the top were dozens of photos and documents. She'd come this far. She needed something to satisfy her insatiable interest. She approached the table and began to peruse the contents. The photos were all of the couple in the window, but the images were all from afar, as if whoever had taken them had done so without their knowledge. Bev's stomach started to turn as she read through the documents. Every one a piece of evidence. Evidence of an affair. It wasn't the affair itself that unsettled her. It was the fact that someone had collected evidence of it and had compiled it right here in the home of the man involved. She set the papers down and began to take steps backward as quietly as she could. But a noise behind her forced her to a complete stop. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Bev was frozen, the fear infiltrating every cell. She was caught. But that wasn't what frightened her. It was what she had walked into. She turned slowly, being careful to control her movements. As she did, she found herself face to face with the barrel of a pistol. The man holding it was calm, but in a way, perplexed. Like he wasn't sure exactly what to do with this discovery. "I'm sorry," she started to say. What are you doing here? You shouldn't be here. I cleaned the apartment across the street, and She couldn't find the words, and any she did came out mumbled through her now shaking lips. She'd never seen a gun in person before, much less had one trained on her face. She couldn't think, and she could hardly breathe. He raised his free hand and rubbed his forehead as if working through a complicated mathematical equation. "Move," he said. "What?" "I said move. Into the dining room," he said, waving the gun in the direction she was to go. She did as she was told, inadvertently holding her hands in the air like she was under arrest. She knew it was silly. She would have felt much better if a police officer were detaining her versus what she was currently experiencing. As she emerged into the dining room, the couple she'd been watching for over a week came into view. They had to hear her enter, but they didn't dare move, and Bev believed she already knew why. "Douglas, Denise, we have an unexpected guest," he said. Still, they didn't move. Bev waited for a verbal confirmation that they were even alive. But then she saw the woman he'd called Denise's throat catch slightly as she fought to control her breathing. "I think introductions are in order. Why don't you go first?" he said, poking Bev in the back with the gun. I'm Bev Thomas. I just cleaned the apartment across the street." "Perhaps you'd like to tell us exactly why you've intruded upon our evening of wonders and romance, Bev Thomas." I noticed them having dinner in the same spot all last week, and You were nosy," the man said, finishing her sentence. I was concerned. You didn't mean what? To break into this apartment? To impose somewhere you weren't welcome? But you did it anyway, didn't you? Bev Thomas. You know what, though? That's okay. You see, you and I are a lot alike. Curious. You were curious about this beautiful couple. So was I. You can imagine just how curious I was when I discovered that my wife of 15 years was having an affair with a wealthier, more attractive, and apparently more adventurous man. Bev didn't know what to say. Her fears were being confirmed, but that didn't bring her a single ounce of relief. For once, she wished she'd been wrong. Since they can't answer for themselves, allow me to complete the introductions. Douglas Allen, my wife's new lover, my darling wife, Denise. As for me, my name is about as important as our marriage was to my whore of a wife. Again, Bev stayed quiet. You must be wondering what exactly you happened upon tonight. Bev Thomas, let me illuminate you. You see, I have been tracking this forbidden love affair for over 2.5 years. Every meetup, every email, every middle-of-the-night phone call that my wife took from the downstairs bathroom as if I wouldn't hear. Everything. I was so moved by the greatest love story ever told that I figured, why not recreate it? Let the lovebirds live through it all one more time. We've been at it for weeks, Bev, day and night. Every dinner date, every intimate conversation, every single moment of sexual engagement, all of it on replay, like a show on Broadway. The obvious difference is an audience of only one to enjoy it, he said, referring to himself. She doesn't have anything to do with this, Mike. Just let her leave. Denise's sudden outburst startled Bev so much that she almost jumped. The woman in the window had finally broken her silence. The man called Mike was still behind her, so Bev couldn't see his face. Even so, she could feel the anger radiating off him like heat from a bonfire. What is the rule, Denise? What is the fucking rule? She didn't respond, nor did she look away from Doug Allen. Her face was expressionless, but her eyes told the story all on their own. It was clear to Bev that Denise was overrun with fear. She'd messed up, and she knew it. Bev flinched as Mike's footsteps met her ears. He moved around her, making his way toward Denise, slowly and methodically, like a hungry tiger closing in on a wounded antelope. I asked you a question, he said calmly as he arrived at the table. Again, she refused to answer. Mike sighed heavily and pulled something from his pocket. Before it registered what he had retrieved, the blade of the folding knife had flipped open and had been driven through Doug's hand, nailing it to the tabletop. Doug screamed out in pain, and Denise did the same. All the fear, anger, and misery exploding out of her. Look what you made me do, you whore. You worthless bitch. You couldn't follow a simple set of fucking rules. Don't break character. Ever. You've ruined the entire sequence. When he was done, he collected himself and turned back to Bev. She expected he was about to explain the rules of engagement in this little game he'd created. But he stopped realizing what he had done. Years of tracking, months of planning, weeks of playing out his fantasy of revenge, and he'd never made a mistake. Until now. He turned back around as quickly as he could, but it was too late. Denise had already pulled the knife from Doug's hand. As his front side became exposed, she drove the knife deep into his chest. He gasped and began to stumble backwards. She followed him onto the floor, where she pulled the blade out and then stuck it in again. Then again, and again. Doug nursed his wounded hand, and Bev watched, frozen in time, as the slaughter ensued. When she no longer had the strength to pull the knife out, and Mike was fighting for his last few breaths, she moved up to his head and whispered something in his ear. His eyes went wide, then slowly shut, as the final bit of life departed from his body. What happened next was a whirlwind of police sirens, flashing lights, EMTs, and crime scene technicians. People in uniform taking Bev's statement again and again. Paramedics checking her for injuries, the flash of cameras as evidence was documented and collected inside the penthouse. She couldn't bring herself to say much of anything, but she hung on every word as Doug and Denise detailed what they had been through while captives of a madman, driven to the edge of sanity by pure rage and jealousy. When the police had finished their questions, and just before the pair were swept off by an ambulance to receive further medical attention at the hospital, Bev had time to ask one single question. She approached the back of the ambulance and looked up into Denise's eyes. "There is so much I don't understand. I'm glad you're both okay. But what did you say to him?" At the end, Denise smiled to herself, like she was about to reveal a childhood secret she'd always promised to take to the grave. She leaned down close so that she could whisper and still be audible. "I told him the truth, that Doug and I knew he was following us for months, and we kept at it anyways. I told him that it made it that much more exciting that he was seeing everything we were doing, and it just made us want to do it that much more. I told him that, and I told him that the only thing better than Doug and I tearing into each other with him knowing was doing it all over again in front of his pathetic face." Before she could say anything more, the paramedics came and secured the doors. Bev watched, speechless, as the ambulance pulled away. Since she didn't have any injuries, she didn't need to go to the hospital. Instead, she went back to the apartment she was supposed to be cleaning. Lost in thought, she wandered over to the window, looking up to an empty table in the penthouse across the street, where she'd first seen the couple in the glass. The above story ends, but the suspense and thrill have never stopped. Right here is another equally interesting story. Please continue listening. Nature or nurture? Sensitive content, serial killers. Nature or nurture? That is the question. Before today, I thought I knew where I stood on the issue. But now, friends, I am not really sure what to think. To give you context, a few weeks ago, after Mother passed, I was finally able to clean out her bedroom. The medical equipment was, of course, quite pristine, but the smell and debris from her glacial demise was simply overwhelming, and it took me days to clear paths in the room. I found the letters in her closet. Even now, it takes me a moment to adjust myself to the mental impact of those pages and pages of her precise Palmer script, describing in the most flowery of language a lifetime of barely requited love. The only mention of me in any of the letters was it, as in, I can get rid of it. My cold, sterile, demanding mother spent decades writing the most passionate and absolutely painful to read, lurid letters to her one-time lover who never once responded. The wrinkled envelopes I found in an old Avon perfume box, each bearing a scarlet ink, return to sender, returned from the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it just preyed on my mind, and I could not get the thoughts out of my head until I took action. Perhaps you may relate to this, perhaps not. So, friends, I eventually found myself in somewhat of a fugue state, an hour into the 2-hour drive up north from Dallas on 75 to US 69, which leads to Penitentiary Street, and then to the Big Mac, a maximum security prison once known for its annual prisoner rodeo, now infamous for its terrible conditions, riots, and death row prisoners, one of whom could be my father. To visit anyone at the Big Mac takes some time. Visiting someone like Louis Landry Reese takes time, and one's absolute forbearance for the most intimately probing of questions and fingers. It wouldn't surprise me if you hadn't heard of Louis Landry Reese and his swath of known and unknown rapes, kidnappings, and killings. But you will be able to find all you want with a few searches. Maybe you know exactly who he is. Driving under the peeling, white-arched grille Oklahoma State Penitentiary sign, buttressed by decaying, similarly painted white bricks pillars, I pulled into one of the few designated parking spots for Big Mac visitors. I turned off the Volvo's engine and sat for a moment, perhaps a bit longer than a moment, with my mind ticking to different thoughts about how maybe today I would finally learn who my father really was, about how Mother would never talk about him, about how she would punish me when I kept asking and asking, and about how Brandy, my old receptionist, would tease me about Volvos being only for short-haired women who shopped at Home Depot. After a bit, the rising sun. Visitors to the Big Mac must arrive very early. Warmed up the air in the car to the point my face began prickling with sweat, and I was brought back from my reminiscing. I opened the door, swung my legs out, and made my way to enter the prison. As I mentioned, the passage from our daily world to that of people such as Louis Landry Reese is rife with probing exams, delays, and grunting guards who entertain themselves with snickering under the breath asides. In the Shawshankian depths of the Big Mac, the black and blue rayon bulk that was my escorting guard halted at metal door exactly like the dozen we had already passed. He turned back toward me and asked without much concern, Are you sure? It is true, friends. I am not a physically intimidating person. Not tall, not wide, not much hair, nor chin. With my decidedly pointed nose and very small teeth, Mother thought it the height of ironic hilarity that I chose the dental profession. A squealing mouse is what she called me, although, to be fair, I learned at a very young age that squealing, no matter how much pain or discomfort, only prolonged such experiences. So squealing is something I have not done in a very long time. I stood straight and focused on how I was a respected professional, how I would be walking out of this dank hellhole of sweating brick and would never ever return, while Louis Landry Reese would only leave feet first. How I would finally find out the truth. Open the door, I whispered. Greasy tendrils of hair leaked from his scalp, down his shiny face, onto pale, meaty forearms, creating a tangled and ripped curtain through which I could see a silver blue eye cutting from me to the closing door of the room and back to me. As the door shut, he lifted his head up, and I was absolutely shocked to see his sunken and caved face with a navel of puckered mouth. Louis Landry Reese had no teeth, literally. Then I heard the strangest sound, like a dog choking and barking at the same time. It was me, laughing hysterically. Louis Landry Reese did not appreciate my levity. Friends, not at all. He tried to stand, but the chains around his wrist went through a steel loop, bolted to the table, kept him stooped over as he shouted at me. The harsh, ratcheting sound of the chains sawing back and forth through the loop assaulted my ears almost as much as his gummy-mouthed curses. The whole episode lasted only a few moments before a phalanx of guards rushed into the room, with one picking me physically up and setting me outside. To be frank, I do not really remember much too clearly from that point. I numbly followed the uniform in front of me and fuzzily collected my belongings before staggering into the Oklahoma sun. I made my way to the Volvo and began the drive back to Dallas. The shrieked words of my father still ricocheting between my ears, and he was indeed my father. One look at his face and those colorless, watery blue eyes that were identical to my own left no doubt, at least to me. I think Louis Landry Reese thought so too, even though he screamed the most terrible things about Mother and how I was just a dentist and not like the others, which is why I was so stunned and really driving on remote control until I got back to Dallas and pulled off Harry Hines into my driveway. The implications of Louis Landry Reese knowing my occupation meant he knew of me. But what did he know about me? I was thinking this over as I went to the basement to check on Brandy. She had finally stopped trying to pull her wrists from the restraints, but it seemed she had really stopped doing much of anything. Even when I clicked the pliers together She barely trembled. That was disappointing. But since Brandy was down to her last 3 teeth, 16, 24, and 41, it was probably time to discharge her and find my next patient. I tell you all this, friends, because contrary to the rantings of Louis Landry Reese, I am not just a dentist. I am the dentist. And Louis Landry Reese also said the others. So, I am posting my story on this dark website as a message in the bottle to see if maybe I have family, others like me, to ask, what do you think, nature or nurture? Let's continue with the next no less thrilling stories. See you soon, Claire. You didn't think you could just leave, did you? I've always known where you were. That little bus station in the city, that motel with the flickering sign on the side of the motorway. I was watching you, even then. How you clutch your bag when you sleep. How you leave the TV on static to drown out the sound of your thoughts. You're clever, slippery, but not clever enough. I have to admit, you know how to cover your tracks. But you should know that you can't shake off your own tail. You're not running away from me. You're running toward me. You'll see soon. Sweet dreams. Wow. Creepy. Not sure how you got this address, but congrats, I guess. Nice to know I'm living rent-free in your head. FYI, the bus station smelled like pee, and the motel had roaches. So maybe put your stalking budget toward better accommodations next time. Only, of course, if there is a next time. But I wouldn't get my hopes up if I were you. Also, if you're going to kill me, maybe don't warn me first. That's kind of, I don't know, sloppy. Anyway, I've got to go. I'm going on a hitchhiking date with a guy named Dave. He says he's got a van. Don't worry, I checked, and there's no candy. Best, Claire. And son, Dave has a record. 2 assaults. 1 missing person case. You're not as sharp as you think. Do you know how easy it would be for me to get to you? To pull you from that van before Dave even knows what's happening? The door's unlocked. Sleep tight. Very funny. Except you can't be outside because I'm writing this from the bathroom at a gas station. And I'm pretty sure the only person outside is the clerk on his smoke break. Unless you've taken up vaping? Mint flavored, I hope. But seriously, do you actually think this whole mysterious stalker act is working? Because from where I'm sitting, on a suspiciously sticky toilet seat, by the way, you owe me for that. You sound kind of desperate, following me across 3 states, tracking my every move, writing me these cryptic little notes like some kind of B-list Bond villain. Feels like a lot of effort for someone who insists they're the one in control. And if you know so much, if you've been watching me this whole time, tell me this. Why am I running? Seriously. Enlighten me. You should know why, unless you don't, which would mean you're not half as smart as you think you are. I need to stop writing now, since someone's knocking on the stall door, and I don't feel like explaining Why I've been loitering in the bathroom with a notepad. Best, Claire. You're running because you're scared, but not of me. The thing you're running from is already in the room with you. Turn around. Right there. I think you've got this whole dynamic twisted. You think I'm scared of you? Cute. You've been following me, sure. But have you noticed the trail of bodies in my wake? Dave made it exactly 27 miles before he swerved into a ditch. Poor guy. Guess he shouldn't have tried to pull that knife. The clerk at the gas station. You'll see his face on the news soon. Well, most of it. So yeah, maybe I'm running, but not from you. You're not hunting me. I'm hunting you. See you soon. Interesting. You always were a quick study. I underestimated you. My mistake. But you're wrong about one thing. I'm not hunting you anymore. I'm inviting you. There's a cabin in the woods, just outside the circus. Red door, broken window. I'll leave the door unlocked. If you're as brave as you think you are, come find me. Or maybe I'll find you first. By circa, you mean the festival extravaganza, right? Cute. I'll bring wine, and maybe a shovel. See you soon, Claire. Yeah, I knew you'd come. I saw you the second you stepped into the woods. That red jacket of yours stands out in the dark like a beacon. You really should have chosen something less noticeable, or maybe you wanted me to see you. Either way, you're here now. I left a present for you. I thought I might as well give you a chance. The knife I pinned this letter down with is all yours. I trust you know how to use it. Do you feel it? The cold sinking into your bones. The silence pressing down on you. That sound behind you. The snap of a branch. That wasn't an animal. You've been so clever up to this point. So slippery. So sharp. But even the smartest prey makes a mistake eventually. And you've just made yours. Don't bother running. I'm already behind you. You're right. I felt you the moment I crossed the tree line. I knew you were there. I could almost hear your breathing. Shallow, controlled, waiting. But you made a mistake, too. You let me get too close. I know it's rude. But I'm going to have to return you kind gift. A girl can't have too many of a good thing, or it gets boring. I felt the heat of your breath on the back of my neck, and I smiled, because I'm not scared of you anymore. Not that I ever was, and you'll never get the chance to write me again. Clever girl, but not clever enough. See you soon. An incident report. Missing person. Claire Marie Jenkins. Location. Isolated cabin. Festival extravaganza. Details. The cabin was found empty upon arrival. Blood splatters were present, but no bodies recovered. Signs of struggle. One broken window. Unidentified footprints lead into the woods. No return tracks. A single sheet of paper was discovered, pinned to the cabin wall with a knife. It read, "Not yet. Claire is presently missing at time of report. Background checks show that she must have changed her identity. Or she didn't have any family. Immediate or extended. Case remains open. and the next story will be told right away. Please listen carefully. Epitaphs to Elsa, September 8th, 1986. Elsa, it's just me now. Just me and the waves. I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe I just want to believe you can still hear me. The boat is quiet without you. I keep thinking I'll hear your footsteps in the cabin. That soft little shuffle you made when you didn't want to wake me. But I know better. You're not here. And I did that. I miss you. God, I miss you. You never should have stayed with me, Elsa. You should have let me rot the moment you saw what I was becoming. But you never ran. Not when the hunger started. Not when my skin came apart. Not even when you saw what I would do. You should have run. You saw it. That thing inside me. It doesn't care what I want. It doesn't care how much I fight. I don't want to remember them, but I do. That old fisherman just happened to be in the wrong place. He looked me in the eye and knew something was wrong. I saw the way his face tightened before he turned to run. It didn't matter. It happened too fast, and he split apart like a red, stained driftwood after they reached him. I didn't want to hurt any of them, but you know what I am, and you know the worst of it. The only thing in this world that can kill me. Water. The sea, the rain, even a goddamn puddle. You said it was poetic, that all we needed to do was wash the sins away, and that would be it. I wish I could tell you I'm sorry and have that be enough, but I know that it isn't. My mind is slipping. I thought I heard you earlier, but when I turned, there was nothing but the water. I can feel it starting to itch beneath my skin again. I must attend to its needs until morning. Leon, September 2nd, 1986. Leon, I woke up from a terrible dream and could not tell where I was, nor even when I was. For the longest time, I thought I was still in our cabin, with the warped floorboards and the leaky window that rattled in the wind. I thought I heard the waves outside, but they were too far away. I sat up and reached for something, but there was nothing. No warmth, no weight, just a hollow feeling. And then I remembered you. I used to think I could live in your shadow forever. That it was enough to stand between you and the world, to hide what you had become from those who would have tried to take you from me. But you never really belonged to me. You belonged to it. I fed you. I kept you safe and suffered with you. And still, in the end, you left me here. I think I was angry. I still might be. You say you miss me. That you never wanted this. That you never wanted them to die. I believe you. You don't have to look for me. I'm already here. Elsa, September 9th, 1986. Afternoon. Elsa, this isn't real. You're not real. I don't know what kind of madness has settled into my head, but I know what I saw. There is no one on this boat. I searched every inch, Elsa. Every cabin, every hatch. There aren't even footprints. Not a single sign that anyone but me has been here. And yet, your letter was waiting for me in the same place I left mine, in your handwriting. Exactly your handwriting. Where are you? What do you mean you're already here? No. No, I won't do this. I won't chase ghosts. I won't let my brain rot on the deck of this damned boat, waiting for another letter to appear out of nowhere. Not when I can still feel the scars where it broke through my skin last night. Raw, burning, until I fed it with something I brought on board. I'll leave this here for you, if only to prove to myself that I'm not completely unraveling. Maybe a drink will help. Leon, September 2nd, 1986. Leon, I can't see the sunset the way I used to, but I know you can. You always liked that time of day best. As the light faded over the horizon, the world softening, I remember watching you, even after you changed. I wanted to believe that if I just held on to you long enough, you would come back to me. I thought love could keep you human. Do you remember what you are, who you have become? You remember the killing, but not the hunger. Do you recall what happened before I died? You used to say that the sea was patient, that it takes its time, wearing things down piece by piece until all that's left is what it chooses to keep. You think you're drifting, waiting to decide how this ends. But you're wrong. You will never truly die here. Not unless you sink. Elsa, September 9th, 1986. Sunset. Elsa, you dated your letter September 2nd. I don't know what kind of joke this is. If this is my mind breaking, or if this is actually you, or if there's no difference anymore. But I know that date. That's the day after you died, and I killed you. I need to say it. I need to write it. I need to stop hiding from it like a coward, because I remember now. I remember the way you looked at me when you realized what I had become. I remember you tried to save me, tried to save them. I remember the knife in your hand and the tears in your eyes when you begged me to just let it end. I remember that you weren't fast enough. I remember the way you screamed when I touched you, the way your body turned to ruin beneath my hands, the way you stopped fighting when you knew there was nothing left to fight for. I remember the moment you stopped being afraid of me. I remember everything, Elsa, and you were right. I am not human anymore. You said the sea is patient, but so is the thing inside me. It waits. It watches. It lets me write these letters like I still have control, like I still have a choice, like I could ever truly leave this boat. But I know better now. I know what I have to do. This time, I'll finish what you started. Leon, September 3rd, 1986. Leon, you stayed up waiting for me, didn't you? You always used to do that when we were kids. You'd sit up by the window, refusing to sleep, until I came back inside. I used to think it was sweet. Now I think maybe you always knew, even before you became this, that you were meant to be alone. I see now that I should have left you alone too, but I stayed and cleaned up after you, wiped their blood from your body, covered for you every time that thing leaked out from beneath your skin. I thought I was protecting you, but I wasn't. I was keeping the monster alive, and that's why you killed me. You can stop pretending now. You remember everything. I tried to end it before it could spread. I would have done it if you'd let me. You should have let me. Instead, you turned on me. You let it break me apart, like all the others. You wept and rocked what was left of me, like I was still yours, like I hadn't just died in your arms. And in some twisted way, maybe I am still yours, but that doesn't matter now. You have one thing left to do. Come visit me where I am now. That is the right thing to do. Love, your sister, Elsa. September 10th, 1986. Elsa. Yes, you know me best. I stayed up all night waiting for you. I watched the page, scotch in hand, eyes burning. I wouldn't sleep, not until I caught you in the act and saw how you did it. But I must have drifted off, because when I opened my eyes, your letter was there, and your last words shattered me. You were my sister, my only sister. You were always there, watching over me, covering for me. You loved me when no one else could, and God damn it, Elsa, I loved you too. We were alone, together, for so long. Maybe that's why it happened. Maybe that's how we fell into something we shouldn't have. Maybe that's why you still stayed after I changed. Why you still brought them to me. I never asked you to do it, but I never stopped you either. And now I see why. Because I was happy. I was happy when you fed me. I was happy when you lied for me, covered for me, hid me. I was happy when you were the only one in the world who saw me for what I was, and still stayed. And I thought that was enough, but you knew better. You knew that as long as I was out here, I wasn't just Leon. I was it. I was the thing that wears me, the thing that spreads itself through my hands, my mouth, my breath. You knew what had to be done, and I stopped you. And now I have to finish it. Elsa, after reading your last letter, I tried something. I let the water touch me. Just a few drops at first. Just enough to test what you told me. And I watched my own skin blacken. I watched it peel away, curl like burnt paper, dust scattering into nothing. And for the first time since that night, I felt something leave me. Something I can never let return. I know what I have to do now. I should have done it a long time ago. I'll see you soon, Elsa. Leon. September 15th, 1986. Radio transmission. U.S. Coast Guard Channel. So 8:42 a.m. EST. Yeah, This is Patrol 6 out of Newport, responding to a distress call. We've located the vessel approximately 17 nautical miles offshore, drifting. No signs of life on board. Copy. Unintelligible reply. Copy. Yeah. We're boarding now. The name on the hull matches the missing vessel reported out of Washington last week. Belonged to one Leon Mathers. Yeah, the suspect in the Olympia killings. Still no sign of a body. Over. Hang on. Christ. Do you smell that? Muffled voices. Jesus. It's in the fog. Thick as hell. The air. God, it's like it's sticking to my skin. Unintelligible reply. Boats in rough shape. Some flooding in the lower cabin, but no visible damage. No sign of struggle. Looks like it's just been out here drifting. There's a letter on the table. Several, actually. We've got personal effects. ID matching Mathers. A sudden, sharp breath. Shit. No body. No trace of him. But we found part of someone. It's a leg. Left, severed mid-thigh. Not clean. No ID yet. Yeah. We'll check the water next. Shuffling, movement. The soft slosh of waves lapping against the hull. Oh, hell. Sir, you need to hear this part. Listen, there's something in the water. Around the boat. Not oil, not debris. It's dark. Black as ink. Looks like it's mixed with the waves. But it's thicker. Like it's trying to hold its shape. God, it's moving. No, I'm serious. It's bubbling. It's a pause, a quick breath. Alive. Chunks in it. Carbon, maybe. But some of them, another sharp breath. Some of them are floating against the current. A quiet, shaken voice in the background. It's watching. Sir? Orders? Unintelligible reply. Collecting samples now. We'll tow the vessel back to port. End transmission. Just when you think all the weird stuff has been told, the next story will make you think again. I didn't mean to do it. I didn't mean to do it. The words echoed in my mind as I stood there in the dark, my hands shaking, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the sound of the storm outside. The wind howled through the trees, and the rain hammered against the windows. It was a night that felt like it was made for horrors. But the real terror, my terror, was already inside. I stared down at his body, lying in a pool of crimson that seemed to stretch out, devouring everything it touched. His once bright eyes, filled with laughter and warmth, were now dull and empty. His chest was still, the rhythmic rise and fall I had come to know so well, now forever silenced. It wasn't supposed to end like this. We weren't supposed to be here. I never meant for any of it to happen. The night had started out differently. We were celebrating. Well, I thought we were. It had been a long week for both of us. John had been working late at the office, and I'd been buried in a dozen little tasks at home. We barely saw each other, only passing like two ships in the night. So, when he suggested dinner out, I'd jumped at the chance to spend some quality time together. We went to that little Italian restaurant we loved, the one tucked away in the corner of the city, with the flickering candles and soft music. Everything felt just right. The kind of evening that reminded me of why we had fallen in love in the first place. However, as the night wore on, something changed. Something was off. Something I couldn't explain. It started when John leaned in and rested his hand on mine across the table. He smiled, but there was something in his eyes I couldn't figure out. Was it uncertainty? Maybe it was just me. I hadn't been sleeping well at all. We had building tension between us for months. First, it was little things that were simple to overlook, but now they were impossible to ignore. "What's on your mind?" I asked, trying to smile back. John sighed and leaned back in his chair, looking down at his plate for a moment before meeting my gaze again. "It's nothing, really. Just work stuff. You know how it is." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed him. I never did. When John didn't want to talk about something, he wouldn't. But then, as we left the restaurant, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. I couldn't help but smile, hoping that maybe he was attempting to rekindle the spark we'd once had. He'd always been good at that, surprising me and keeping the romance alive in his own way. "What's this?" I asked, teasing him as I took the box from his hand. "Just a little something," he said, his voice sounding odd. I opened it, and inside was a ring. But it wasn't a shiny, sparkly diamond ring that you'd expect as a romantic gesture. This ring was old and looked like perhaps it had been passed down through generations. The ring was tarnished, and the stone had a crack in it. "It's beautiful," I said, though I wasn't sure what I meant by that. There was something that didn't sit right in my gut. "Do you like it?" he asked. I nodded, but found it difficult to smile genuinely. I felt chills all over. "Where did you get this?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. Something felt wrong. John didn't answer right away. His eyes had shifted, almost like he was hiding something. He looked away before attempting to look at me again. "It's been in the family for years. It's special. I thought you would like it." "Special," I echoed. My fingers traced the ring's surface, and it was cold, even colder than metal typically is. I could feel the tension between us. It wasn't just about the ring. It was deeper than that. Something had been building for a long time. John as acting odd, avoiding my eyes, trembling as he reached for the car keys. But we didn't say anything more on the drive home. It was quiet, other than the rain that had started. Everything was blurred by the water running down the windshield. The wipers were thankfully filling our silence. When we arrived home, we went through our routine of getting ready for bed. John took a long shower while I tried to relax in the living room. But my mind wouldn't shut off. I kept thinking about the ring, about the way it felt in my hands, and John's strange behavior. When John finally came out of the shower, he walked past me without saying a word, heading toward the bedroom. "John, wait," I said, my voice shaking. "Is something going on? Something you're not telling me?" He stood at the bedroom door and turned to me. He stared for a moment, with just a blank expression. Then he sighed and walked toward me. He sat down on the couch next to me. "I've been thinking a lot," he began with a low voice. "About us. About everything." My heart thudded loudly as I waited for him to continue. "I think we're drifting, Sarah," he said, his words immediately taking my breath away. "I just don't know if we can fix this anymore. We've been drifting for months. It felt like the world was tilting." I couldn't breathe. "Drifting?" I whispered. "What do you mean? We're fine. We're busy. We're just busy. That's all. We can fix this and make it work." John shook his head. "I'm not sure anymore. We've both been pretending. We're just not the same people we were when we got married, Sarah. I'm tired. Really tired. I don't think I can keep pretending." I wanted to cry, to scream, but I couldn't. All I could to do was sit there, trying to figure out what he meant. None of it made sense. I'd been trying so hard to hold everything together, and now it felt like it was slipping through my grasp. Before I could say anything, he stood up and went to the bedroom. I heard the rustle of sheets and the soft thud of him getting into bed. I didn't know what to do or say. I sat there for a long time, what felt like hours. The silence was killing me. Finally, I was unable to stand the distance between us any longer, so I went to the bedroom and stood in the doorway. John was lying on his side, with his back facing me. I couldn't see his face, but I felt the coldness coming from him. "John," I whispered. He didn't respond. "I can't lose you," I said, my voice cracking. "Please don't give up. We can work through this. I'll do anything." Still, there was no answer. Something inside me snapped. I was frustrated and scared of losing him. I didn't know what came over me, but I crossed the bedroom, grabbed the ring from the nightstand, and chucked it across the room. The silence was broken by the ring hitting the wall. "Do you really think this is going to fix everything?" I shouted. "This stupid ring? A symbol of what? The lies we've been telling each other?" Finally, John turned to face me, his eyes wide. Was he angry? Scared? But before he could say anything, I saw it. Something sharp and dangerous glinting in his hand. He had a knife. I didn't see the motion coming. 1 minute, I was standing there, shouting at him. And the next, I felt the cold metal press into my side. It wasn't deep, but it stopped me in my tracks, clutching my wound. "John," I whispered, my voice trembling with disbelief. "What are you?" But he didn't answer. He didn't move. I was frozen, trying to understand what had just happened. My breath came in shallow gasps. In a panic, I grabbed at the knife, trying to push it away. I stumbled back, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what happened. Then, in a blur of motion, I grabbed the nearest thing I could get, a heavy glass vase, and swung it at him. It hit him in the face, and he staggered backward, the knife slipping from his hand. But it wasn't enough to stop him. He lunged toward me, and I fought back with everything I had. My mind was full of fear, confusion, and anger. I didn't know what I was doing anymore, or how it happened. All I knew was I needed to protect myself. The next thing I knew, John was on the floor. His body was crumpled, his unblinking wide eyes staring up at me. His chest no longer rose and fell. I didn't mean to do it. The above story has ended. Let's listen to the next story. The Angst of Antilla. "Tell me the truth. Where are you from?" Yannick roared, leader of the Goobies, a notorious nomadic southern desert clan. In his teepee kneeled a young woman bound by the ankles and wrists. She wore a dirty, white satin tunic and breeches. Her brunette hair escaped from under her sand-dusted headscarf. Around her tired eyes, a darkened mixture of sand and sweat stuck to her skin. Other than that, the rest of her face remained untouched. Inside the teepee stood a few wooden chests and a bed of dried rushes wrapped in linen. A lantern sat next to the bed, and about 4 woven rugs covered the desert floor. A leather bag lay across the floor, next to the woman. Through the crack of the entrance, stars could be seen, twinkling in the inky darkness of the desert sky, stretching out towards the far horizon. A slight chill wisped its way inside and curled around the room. Besides the faint talk of those in the surrounding tents, only the crackle of the rushes burning in the lantern could be heard. "I've said too much," the woman murmured. Yannick slapped her across the face. Her head snapped sideways, the red sting blooming across her cheek. Slowly, she turned back to face Yannick, trembling with rage. She glared at him, her blazing eyes drilling unsettlingly into his soul. Yannick took a step back. The wrinkles on his forehead loosened as frustration turned to shock. "No way. This can't be," he whispered, feeling his stomach drop. He lowered to one knee to face her. He had to confirm what he was seeing. He let out a sharp sigh of disbelief. His eyes weren't fooling him. "How?" he asked her. She continued to shoot daggers at him, remaining quiet. "How?" he repeated. "How what?" she spat. "Amber." Your eyes turned amber. She broke eye contact with Yannick and stared blankly at the reed-woven floor. Her eyes flickered back to a deep shade of brown, Yanuk shuddered as he felt a sudden chill leave his bones. Tell me I'm wrong when I say that you're from Antilla, Yanuk said, holding his breath. The woman shut her eyes and sighed. Tell me, he roared impatiently. She looked up at him again, amber flickering faintly through her pupils. A coldness instantly rushed over him again. You're not wrong. I am from Antilla, Yanuk exhaled sharply, falling backwards to sit on the floor. He crossed his legs and ran one hand through his hair. H. How is it possible? How did you survive? He questioned in a softer tone. Untie me, then I'll tell you, she hissed, her menacing amber gaze burning into Yanuk. You have some nerve. Then let my secrets remain untold, she jeered, narrowing her eyes. Her lip curled slightly. Yanuk scoffed before getting up. He walked over to her leather bag and threw it angrily behind him, out of the woman's reach. He reached down, lifted the end of his robe, and took a sharp dagger from a tight piece of cloth wrapped around his ankle. He kneeled behind the woman and started to cut away at her restraints. She rolled her shoulders and stretched her neck the moment she was free. She stood up briefly, stretching her legs, and before sitting back down with her legs crossed. Yanuk kept his eyes locked on her, dagger in hand, before he sat down again. Thank you, she said, with a slight nod. I will tell you how I managed to make it out alive from Antilla. But it will not help you, nor will it bring any peace to this situation. It will only quench your curiosity. A favor for a favor, Yanuk said, twisting his knife from the blade's tip. Very well. The woman dug deep into her mind to try to resurface the day she made it out of Antilla. The memories came flooding back in an instant. Tonight, a distant star will die. It will explode into blues and pinks and purples, Kira said, bursting with excitement. And how do you know this? I said, crossing my arms. Kira had a vivid imagination. We never knew if what she was saying was fact or something she had created in her head. Next to the North Star last night, I noticed one of the stars getting dimmer and dimmer until it disappeared. It was always there. I had it plotted on my star map. I waited for a long time, but it never came back. This lines up with the legend of Nara, Thomas interrupted. The legend that described Nara Envith witnessing the night sky, illuminating in an unfathomable display. The disappearance of a star followed by a cascade of colors, painting the night sky. Thomas leaned against one of the cobblestone walls of a side street in the market square of Antilla. The three teens were hidden in a corner of the square, watching the passers-by. The city was bustling with Antillian traders and foreign folk. Horses with small wooden carts clicked along the uneven cobblestone roads surrounding the square. The stalls were propped up in the center, interested customers weaving their way in and out of them. Bursts of vibrant colors decorated the city, from vivid Antillian woven silk to collections of earthy sienna spices from the south. A preacher suddenly emerged from the crowds and took a stand at the city's gathering point next to where we were chatting. He instantly drew the attention of the market-goers. His brown hair was scraggly, and his cheeks wore a crimson flush. His sweaty, cream tunic adhered to his skin and was half stuffed into the top of his black breeches. His chest heaved dramatically as he gasped for air. "We need to make peace with the brethren of Tuiga," he shouted, trying to regain his breath. "They will come, and they will not stop unless we equalize the trade in the north. The rulers of Antilla are setting us up to die. Open your eyes, people. The brethren are coming." The city guards swiftly appeared and hauled the man off the gathering point. A few of his passionate followers preached behind him, throwing their fists in the air in frustration as he was dragged away into the teeming crowds. Quickly, a bard stood up, seizing the unoccupied podium, curating songs of mockery about the preacher. He quickly gained a laughing audience. "Well, do you want to join me on my search tonight?" Kira toothily smiled, oblivious to the scenes around her. Thomas and I exchanged looks. We knew that meant camping on the roof of her steading till early hours of the morning in the freezing cold. "It's a bit chilly, don't you think, Priscilla?" Thomas asked, raising his eyebrows. I agree. Besides, my parents would not appreciate it if I were to fall ill." I get it, Kira grumbled. "But just know that you are missing the chance to watch a legend be reborn. The legend of Kira." Thomas and I rolled our eyes. We spent some time browsing the market stalls for any interesting items we could buy with our measly 5 silver coins. To our avail, we found nothing. Once the vendors began disassembling their stalls, we headed home for dinner. The foreign merchants made their way to their respective inns, weary from the long day. The concealed stars slowly emerged into the darkened sky, and a cold air settled over the city. Merchants drank into the early hours, while children drifted to sleep. Wrapped in woolen blankets, I woke up to the frantic banging of Kira's mother on our front door in the dark of night. "Hurry, hurry, wake up!" she screamed. My dad rushed to the door. My mother's footsteps could be heard running to the kitchen. In the background, I could hear the petrified voice of Kira's mother explaining to my father, "The brethren are coming." Kira saw them crescenting the hills from the south. "We don't have much time. We need to leave before they get here. There are thousands of them." Without a moment's hesitation, my dad came storming into my room. "Dayu, what's happening?" I asked. He grabbed my arm and dragged me off my bed without a word. My mother was waiting at the door with a lantern. In the span of a few minutes, buildings had been set alight and screams could be heard echoing through the city from the outer walls. We ran through the streets, trying to avoid soldiers and other screaming townsfolk, hoping to make it to the north of the city before the soldiers got there. But it was no use. We were surrounded. "Priscilla, you need to listen to me," my dad said sternly. He kneeled down to face me and placed his hands firmly on my shoulders. "Those carts by the city walls will soon be leaving. You need to climb under one and grab on. Do not let go. Do you hear me? Do not let go. You need to get out of here. We love you so much. We will come find you. Go. Be safe, my dear." Tears spilled down his cheeks, illuminating in the fire's blaze. "Dad, go!" I did what I was told. I ran to a horse and carriage next to one of the burning buildings by the city's outer wall. Before I went under, I looked back, hoping to see my parents to say my final goodbyes. But they had vanished. I climbed under the large carriage and held on to the wooden foundations. I wrapped the top of my feet behind another plank of wood. It only took a minute or so before a couple came running in a panic and climbed into the carriage. "Hurry!" the woman screamed as her partner leaped inside, closing the door behind him. A coachman jumped onto the front of the cart and instantly got the horse in a gallop. The cart moved quickly out of the city, cobblestone streets changing to rough dirt roads. We turned occasionally until we were headed for the south. As we moved further away, the stillness of the cold, airy night echoed the distant, muffled screams escaping from Antilla. Tears slipped down my cheeks, but a cry could not form. I didn't know if I would ever see my family or friends again. My whole world had changed in a heartbeat. My thoughts were suddenly interrupted by the jolt of the cart coming to a stop. I heard the neigh of a distant horse and footsteps approaching the carriage. There was a sudden gurgling as the swish of an arrow flew through the air. There was a splintering of wood, and a sudden force pushed the carriage backwards. The coachman's horse neighed, its nostrils flaring as it pulled against its reins, hooves scraping against the ground. The footsteps neared the cart until I could see the feet of what I could only guess was a soldier. The soldier walked to the carriage door and swung it open. Those inside screamed in fear before the man silenced their petrified cries with a pierce of a sword. The blood in their throats gurgled and spluttered for a few seconds, their bodies jerking and flailing in the carriage before they fell still. My lungs screamed for air. My heart was racing in my chest. The soldier dragged the bodies out of the cart and threw them on the ground with a thump. Their heads bounced off the soil. Two sets of lifeless eyes stared blankly at me from the dirt floor. The woman's gown and the man's tunic were drenched in blood. and they had huge gaping wounds for necks. I felt my palms get sweaty and my grip loosening. "Don't let go, Priscilla. Don't let go," I told myself. I felt a sudden heat and heard a crackle of wood. The carriage had been set alight. I turned my head frantically, trying to find the feet of the murderer. Instead, 4 hooves galloped alongside the carriage and headed in the direction of Antilla. I wanted to wait until I couldn't hear the thunder of hooves anymore before letting go. Instead, the fumes of burning wood engulfed my lungs, and the hiss of flames dancing in the wind deafened the soldier's departure. The fire closed under the carriage. The sweat on my hands was as slippery as oil. My body burned, sweat grabbing onto my hair and the fabric of my clothes. The roaring flames licked off my exposed skin as they surrounded me. It was then I let go. I scurried out from under the carriage, staying low. I looked cautiously around, but saw nothing. I carefully moved away from the cart, pulling myself along the ground with my forearms and pushing myself with my feet. My heart pounded in my chest. I had to keep going. I had to be brave. A forest lay ahead. Through the mud and reeds, I finally made it to where the grass met the tree line. I got up on one knee, attempting to stay low, wiping the sweat from my forehead on my ashy linen shirt. I tried to regain my breath. I looked back at Antilla, the burning carriage collapsing in the corner of my eye. The city was being swallowed by the fire. I could make out hundreds upon thousands of more soldiers marching their way to the stone walls of my city. Their huge war band stretched into the distance, further than the eye could see. A harrowing pain of grief shot through me, each quivering breath a battle against the burning agony in my chest. Before I could process anything, the sound of soldiers on horses re-emerged from my left. Without thinking, I ran. I ran into the forest, never looking back. I had lost everything that day. There has ever been a more notorious massacre than the massacre of Antilla. There were no survivors, except for me. Yanuk shook his head in disbelief. "Are you ready?" he asked. "For what?" Yanuk stood up and outstretched his hand. "To regain the north." Priscilla blinked at him in bewilderment. They did not only steal Antilla. The Brethren banished us nomads from our territories, leaving us stateless in the south. They are trying to rule over all the sacred lands. We shall not let that happen. We are going to fight. We will take back what is rightfully ours. Are you in? Priscilla hesitated for a moment. The bottled anger boiled her blood. A fiery passion burst in the pit of her stomach, longing to gain revenge for her friends, her family, her home. She looked up at Yanuk, eyes burning with an igniting amber. Priscilla nodded and took Yanuk's hand. She was ready to fight. The next story will begin now. The Unnatural Diary. Part 1. The Unintended Discovery. Dust swirled in the dim light as Sarah pushed aside a stack of brittle newspapers, her fingers brushing against something unexpected, soft, worn leather. She reached into the box of forgotten books and relics, pulling free an old, weathered diary. Its edges were frayed with time, the cover nearly stripped of its once proud embossing, now smooth and cool beneath her touch. A faint residue of salt clung to its surface, as if it had weathered years of quiet decay or been touched by the sea itself. Intrigued, she carefully pried it open near the middle, where thick, textured pages crackled with age. The paper felt different, denser than usual, almost like parchment. The ink, though faded, carried an unusual shimmer, as if the words still pulsed with some lingering energy, revealing a chilling passage. I had to move quickly, but the floorboards betrayed me, groaning beneath my steps as I crept through the darkened hall. It was close. I could feel its snarling breath, cold and damp, seeping through the walls, making them feel thinner than they were. The air was thick with the weight of its presence. I had to make it to the kitchen. I had to get to the closest bag of consecrated salt before it was too late. A shiver ran down Sarah's spine. The words read like a story, yet something about them felt strangely real and weren't meant to entertain, but to warn. She flipped another page, the dry parchment whispering as it moved, and something slipped loose. A note, a single yellowed slip of paper, fluttered to the attic floor. Sarah bent to retrieve it, her pulse quickening as she read the hastily scrawled words. If you've found this, it already knows. It already knows? The words sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. What does that mean? What already knows? Shaking off the unease, she set the diary aside, convincing herself it was just a very old diary. Nothing more. She returned to cleaning, determined to finish the task before indulging her curiosity. Later, with the attic finally organized, Sarah sank into the old desk chair she had recently dusted off and pulled from the corner. It paired well with an antique desk she had just cleaned off, a piece that had likely sat buried beneath clutter for years. Exhaustion giving way to curiosity, she reached for the diary, opening it to the first page, her fingers brushing over the worn pages, coming to the inside of the cover, where a passage so intimate it felt as though she was intruding on something deeply personal, was scrawled in elegant handwriting. To my beautiful Colette, may the enchantment of these pages cradle your precious memories and bridge the distance between us, keeping our hearts forever intertwined with eternal love. Roderick Shadowthorn of Moonvale Hollow. Beneath the inscription, in a more delicate script, another line had been added, given to me by my love on Saturday, February 28th, 1953. Sarah's pulse quickened. The names, Roderick Shadowthorn, Moonvale Hollow, felt almost otherworldly, like something plucked from a forgotten fairy tale. Sarah turned to the first entry, March 2nd, 1953. My dearest new diary. I am excited to begin writing. I can scarcely believe my fortune. Has it only been weeks since I met Roderick? It feels as though I have known him forever, as though our souls recognized one another long before our eyes had ever met. He is unlike anyone I have ever known. His presence is both briskly confident and gentle, and his words laced with a wisdom as though he has seen lifetimes beyond my own. Fascinates me. When I am with him, the world feels richer and brighter, as if I have stepped beyond the veil and into something wondrous. His world is unlike anything I could have imagined. Mystical, brimming with enchantment and secrets woven through everything there. He speaks of things I cannot yet comprehend, yet I believe every word. When he takes my hand, I swear I can feel the pulse of something ancient and powerful. He calls himself a hermit, or rather, that's what others call him. But to me, he is nothing short of extraordinary. Everything about him is mesmerizing. His long, dark waves that frame his face, the depth of his warm brown eyes, and oh, the way he looks at me, as if I am the only thing that exists in his world. It sends my heart racing, my breath catching in my throat. I have never felt so seen, so cherished. If this is love, then let me remain lost in it forever. I do not know what the future holds, nor how we will balance our lives together. But I know I wish to be with Roderick forever, and I will follow wherever this enchantment leads. Forever hopeful, Colette. Wow, Sarah exhaled the word, unable to stop the tinge of jealousy creeping into her voice. To feel that in love, to be cherished like that. She had once known that feeling, back when she and Neil were still wrapped in the bliss of their early days. But those days had faded, worn thin by time and disappointment, until all that remained was silence and a divorce finalized 3 years ago. Now, her world revolved around work, the occasional night out with friends, and a growing reluctance to let anyone get too close again. She shook off the thought and turned the page, only to feel as though something else was guiding her hand. The diary fell open to a blank page, yet at the top, written in the same elegant script, a date had already been inscribed. March 15th, 2025. Sarah's breath hitched. Her pulse pounded in her ears. That's today's date. She stumbled back, nearly losing her balance. Her mind raced for an explanation, but none made sense. The diary was old, decades old. How could this be? A chill swept through the attic. and she rubbed her arms, trying to shake the unease pressing against her chest. It's just a coincidence. A weird, creepy coincidence. Forcing a nervous laugh, she muttered, "Okay, that's enough reading for today. I just need a shower, food, and..." Before she could finish, a brilliant light erupted from the diary, flooding the attic in a blinding radiance. The air crackled, thick with an energy she could feel rushing over her skin. A high-pitched hum filled her ears as the pages of the diary flared open, their edges glowing with an unnatural heat. Sarah barely had time to scream before the light consumed her. Then, silence. The attic stood empty. The diary lay undisturbed on the desk. A new entry had appeared on the once blank page. March 15th, 2025. I could sense a release. The connection to her world is back. It seems different somehow. Oh, how I can't wait to see her again. What is this? She opened it? Who is she? She has dared to open Colette's diary. She will answer for this. She will. The sentence trailed off, the ink still wet, as if waiting to be finished. Part 2. The Vanished Sister. As the last of the evening sun faded into a moonless sky, Gloria settled in beside her husband, the familiar hum of their favorite television show filling the room. The night was calm, uneventful, until the phone shattered the quiet with a sharp trill. Gloria glanced at the caller ID. A slight frown creased her brow. Miranda? Sarah's friend? Why would she be calling? Perplexed, she rose from the couch, murmuring to her husband, "I'll be right back." Pressing the phone to her ear, she answered hesitantly. "Hello? Miranda? Hey, Gloria. I'm sorry for calling so late." Miranda's voice wavered, the hesitation in her tone setting Gloria instantly on edge. "I got your number from Sarah's records," and Gloria's throat tightened. Sarah's records? We were wondering if everything was okay with her. She hasn't been to work in about a week, and we're starting to get worried. We've tried calling, leaving messages, but she hasn't answered. This isn't like her at all. And Miranda hesitated before continuing, her voice barely above a whisper. She missed an important deadline for a major project on Wednesday. Gloria gripped the phone tighter. Sarah? Missing work? Ignoring calls? Failing to meet a deadline? The words barely registered as the realization slowly settled into fear. She hadn't spoken to her sister in nearly 2 weeks. That wasn't unusual for them. Life had a way of pulling them in different directions, but Sarah not showing up for work, and no word to anyone, that was impossible. That was not Sarah, and suddenly, the quiet night didn't feel so peaceful anymore. The familiar rhythm of her world began to close in. Where is my sister? By the time the police got involved, Gloria had already exhausted every possible explanation. Even Sarah's ex-husband Neil had flown into town, trying to find out what he could from their mutual acquaintances and his family in the area. But the more they searched, the deeper the mystery became. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle, no evidence of foul play. Sarah's car remained parked in the driveway. Her purse sat neatly on the dining table, car keys beside it. The house, meticulously arranged, just as she always kept it. Security footage only deepened the mystery. The last recording showed Sarah arriving home from work last Friday, locking the door behind her, and then nothing. No one entered. No one left, leaving the house feeling eerily undisturbed, as if she had vanished without a trace. Her co-workers, Amalia and Miranda, had been the first to raise the alarm. They knew their friend would not miss work, especially not a major deadline, not without calling, not without an explanation. This was an impossibility for someone as methodical and precise as Sarah. So where had she gone? Then there was the opened diary in the attic, sitting on the antique desk in the attic. Its cracked leather cover bore the weight of years. It wasn't Sarah's. Gloria knew that much. The pages, thick and time-worn, had been left open as if abandoned in haste. And there, scrawled in elegant yet unsettling handwriting, was a date, March 15th, 2025, last Saturday, the day after Sarah was last seen. The police had skimmed through the diary, dismissing it as nothing more than an old journal Sarah had stumbled upon. Perhaps she had been reading it, maybe even planning to write something inspired by it. After all, she had only moved into the house last October. The previous owner, a woman in her 90s, had passed away the year before, and her children had taken what little they wanted. Antiques, heirlooms, family photographs. The rest had been left behind in their rush to sell the house. But as Gloria sat at the old antique desk staring at the diary, unease slithered through her. She reached for it hesitantly, fingers grazing the worn leather cover. A whisper of movement stirred the air, though the room was still. The moment she picked up the book, a chill pricked deep in her bones. Something told her that Sarah hadn't just disappeared. She had been taken. Part 3, the final entry. Taking a steadying breath, Gloria flipped through the pages, only to have them land on the last recorded entry again. March 15th, 2025. I could sense a release. The connection to her world is back. It seems different somehow. Oh, how I can't wait to see her again. What is this? She opened it? Who is she? She has dared to open Colette's diary. She will answer for this. She will... The ink shimmered in shifting, iridescent hues of black and blue, as if the words were still being formed, not yet complete. A low hum vibrated through the attic, the air thickening with something unnatural. Gloria clenched her jaw. An aching sense of dread settled in her chest. This wasn't just a diary. This was something else. Something supernatural. Sarah, what did you do? With a deep breath, she turned the page. And March 20th, 2025. She keeps running again. I'll find her again. She will tell me where Colette is. She does not belong. She is not Colette. She fights, but she cannot escape. She will stay. If I cannot have my Colette, I found her again. She hides. These people cannot protect her from me. She is strong, but endurance lasts only so long. Gloria's stomach twisted. Sarah was alive, but she wasn't just missing. She was trapped. Somewhere beyond this world, desperation clawed at her chest. There had to be something, some way to help Sarah. Flipping frantically through the brittle pages, she stopped when she found an entry dated April 10th, 1956. The ink was uneven, smudged in places, as though written in haste. April 10th, 1956. I have kept it at bay with consecrated salt. I believe I have found a way to seal this diary. It was forged by Roderick's own hands, a doorway between both worlds. It seems impossible to destroy, but I must protect my husband, my children. The salt has bound the door. He cannot come through that way again. I did love him once, but what he was becoming, now he is lost to rage and darkness. No longer the man I loved. He is something else now. A vile creature. I pray no one ever finds this diary. I have been told, soak cloth in sea salt. Wrap the diary within it. The realms will be severed. If this works, this will be my last entry. If it doesn't, God help me. The smudged words ended abruptly. Gloria's hands trembled as she closed the diary. She knew what she had to do. Colette had sealed the diary once before. Gloria would do it again. Gloria searched the attic, her hands trembling, looking for any salt that may have been left. Thankfully, Sarah had cleaned and organized the space not too long ago, making it easier to find what she needed. But would it work? Would it not only seal the diary, but also bring Sarah back? Her fingers brushed against something cool and metallic. An old tin can with the words "consecrated salt" embossed on its worn surface. Inside, a thick, heavy bag of salt remained untouched. Waiting, anxious, Gloria quickly opened the diary to the most recent entry. Her heart pounded as she poured a thick line of salt down the center of the open pages, then traced a protective circle around it. She didn't know what she was doing, but she had to do something. It had already been a week since Sarah disappeared. The air shifted. A strange, oppressive stillness pressed down on the attic. Then, the diary lifted off the desk. A plume of smoke curled from its pages as an eerie glow pulsed from within. The pages flared open, flipping wildly as a gust of wind erupted through the attic. Bolts of crackling light shot from the diary, slamming into the wooden beams and shaking the very foundation of the house. Gloria stumbled back, shielding her face as the attic groaned, the walls pulsating as if the house itself were alive. Then, a scream, low and guttural, full of rage and loss, a scream that was not human, and just as suddenly as it began, everything stilled. The diary dropped to the floor with a final thud, its edges slightly singed. The attic fell silent, the air refreshed into somewhat normalcy. Gloria hesitated before stepping forward. The diary lay motionless, its pages now eerily still. A single final entry had appeared. March 21st, 2025. She is gone. My Colette has left me. I am nothing without her. Oh, Colette. I am so sorry. I loved you so. I waited. You never came. I am no more, finally, released from my agony. Then, without warning, the diary slammed shut. Gloria's breath caught. Where is Sarah? Please, give me my sister back, she cried, voice breaking. A soft thud echoed from downstairs. Heart pounding, Gloria bolted down the steps, and there, lying in the center of the living room, was Sarah. Dazed, shaken, a little battered, but very much alive. Sarah blinked at her, disoriented. Gloria? Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. You're here. What happened? Tears blurred Gloria's vision as she rushed forward, pulling her sister into a fierce hug. Oh, Sarah, you're home. Sarah shuddered against her. I saw him. Roderick. He was a monster, Gloria. Twisted by rage. He was searching for Colette, furious that she had betrayed him, that she had moved on, married someone else. Gloria cupped Sarah's face, her thumbs brushing against her cheeks, wiping the tears. You're safe now. It's over. Sarah's gaze flickered toward the attic door. Her voice was quieter now, wary. Is it? Gloria took a slow breath. I think he finally found peace. After all these years, he was released from his pain. Sarah nodded, but unease lingered in her expression. Then let's make sure no one ever opens that diary again, Gloria agreed. And without hesitation, they climbed back up to the attic, grabbing the diary. Then, under the moon's watchful glow, they carried it out back, straight to the fire pit. As the flames consumed the aged leather and time-worn pages, an unnatural wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the last echoes of Roderick Shadowthorn of Moonvale Hollow. And for the first time in 70 years, Moonvale Hollow would be forgotten forever. Or so they hoped. We think it's over, but in fact, it's just begun. The next story will thrill you in a completely different way. The whisper in the city. The dark skeletons of skyscrapers stretched into the twilight sky. I trudged along an empty street, my feet dragging through the damp sand, leaving deep grooves behind me. How long had I been here? I couldn't tell. The overcast horizon was slowly growing lighter, the mist thinning with each passing moment. The street seemed familiar to me, but any landmarks that might have been here before were completely effaced now. Everything around me was falling apart, disintegrating into sand that covered every inch of the ground. Suddenly, a soft, faint whisper came from somewhere in the distance. I couldn't remember The last time I'd seen anyone else in this desolate place, so I shuffled toward the sound. The voice came again, this time a little closer and more insistent, but I still couldn't make out the words or pinpoint where it was coming from. I tried to pick up my pace, but the sand was dense and viscous between my toes. The whisper kept calling, getting clearer, as though someone was tuning a radio. It was soothing, but firm. I sensed it wished me no harm, at least as long as I did what it told me to. Finally, I understood what it was saying. "Come on, just a little bit further," the voice urged. It seemed like it was coming from a building to my right. I stared into the shadows in the gaping doorway that led into a dark hall. Nobody was there. I caught a reflection in one of the grimy shards of glass jutting from a window frame. Was it me? It couldn't be. How could I be this old and shriveled? I turned away and wandered toward the low horizon. "We need to get ready. Somebody is coming," the voice called from up ahead. A warm rain suddenly began to fall. It frothed in my hair and trickled down my cheeks. The air filled with a strange scent, something fresh and sweet. It didn't seem right. Rain shouldn't smell like that. The voice kept coaxing me forward, and I kept on wading through fragrant sheets of rain, my feet squelching in the soggy sand. After a while, the rain stopped, and the sky cleared a little, though the sun was still hidden behind the thick veil of clouds. The lukewarm mist curled around every turn, filling the streets that branched out from the crossroads I passed. If only it were clear enough to see what lay in the distance. Maybe then I could remember. Just as I reached the next junction, the whisper gave me a new command. "All right, let's get something to eat. Come on now. Turn here." I looked from side to side. Across the road to my left stood the remains of a diner. I plodded toward the building through the endless sand. I thought there couldn't possibly be anything to eat here, but as I stumbled over the threshold, I caught a whiff of toast and coffee. The diner was as decayed as everything else in this city. There was less sand inside than on the street, but it still covered the floor with an even layer. The display counter stood empty, the glass shattered. Here and there, overturned furniture lay scattered across the ground. The upholstery on the chairs and benches had rotted away a long time ago. The cup-shaped clock on the wall was missing its hands. Decay, dust, and sand. There was no one inside. Still, I heard muted whispers coming from every corner, buzzing like cicadas on a summer night. I moved through the room, trying to make out what the voices were saying, but there were just too many of them now. I shuffled through the jumbled chairs and tables to the center of the room. Here, on one of the tables, sat a plate of food and a cup of coffee. My stomach rumbled. There were no utensils, so I grabbed the food with my hands, stuffing it into my mouth. The toast was crunchy on the outside and soft on the inside. The omelet was fluffy and creamy. The coffee was strong and sweet. How long had it been since I had last eaten anything? I wasn't sure. It felt like ages. Suddenly, the air around me shimmered as though in a heat haze. The dilapidated diner faded away, and I found myself in a warm, sunlit kitchen. Light wood furniture, a crisp tablecloth, plates with delicate flower patterns on the rim. A woman stood in front of the stove. Her hair fell in neat waves, and she wore a light blue fit and flare dress. She turned to me and smiled. "Georgie, would you like another piece of toast?" she asked. Was she talking to me? Was that my name? I wanted to ask her what was going on, but before I could find the words, the mirage disappeared. I was back in the decaying diner, an empty plate before me. "Okay, George, you're done? Let's go now," the whisper cooed. I followed the voice back into the street. It kept urging me forward with its bright, incessant tone. Well, at least now I knew my name. But all the other questions still whirled in my head. What did the voice want from me? Where was I going? How long had I been here? Who was I? Really, it felt like this mess in my head would boil over, washing away all this dirty sand and all the debris of this dead city. I gritted my teeth, clenched my fists, and plowed forward. At last, the road led me to a park. Patches of grass poked through the sand. The trees, covered in yellow and red leaves, peeked through the fog, taunting me. A path lined with benches led into the mist. All right, let's sit down here. I settled onto the nearest bench. Quiet fragments of music fluttered to me from somewhere far away. The sound was comforting, familiar. The voice hummed around me for a moment before fading into the background. The music grew louder and steadier. I thought I recognized the melody, but couldn't quite put my finger on it. It reminded me of someone I used to miss. I sat alone, enveloped by the soothing blanket of music, staring at the colorful trees before me. Bit by bit, my angst and frustration melted away. After a while, I heard the whispers again. The voice that had been guiding me was talking to somebody else now. The new voice seemed familiar, like I'd heard it sometime long ago, in another life. I felt a movement in the air beside me. Someone touched my hand. "Dad? Dad, it's me."
Child.
The small room was tidy and clean, as nice as a room in such a facility could be. The curtains were open, and you could see a small park colored in gold and red by the approaching cold. An old jazz standard was flowing from the player in the corner. A woman sat on a stool beside an armchair where an old, frail man rested. She held his hand. "I'm sorry, Miss Ross. He's not having a good day today," a nurse said gently from behind the armchair. To be honest, they're few and far between now, and it's hard to say how many more he'll have. I know, but it's still so hard. It's like he's wandering further and further away, the woman said, wiping the corner of her eye. Dad, it's Katie. I'm here." His dry, thin fingers tightened around hers. The above story ends, but never stops. Here is another story that will not disappoint you. Dear Death. Dear Death. Hello, old friend. I would be amiss if I called you a stranger now, as the frequency of your visits in my life have made us more than acquaintances. It has been years since our first run in together. When I met you, I didn't understand. You were a being within yourself, a standalone, vital force that I didn't recognize for what you really stood for. Your introduction to me preceded the death of my grandpa on September 24th, 1998. The mighty being that he was, the biggest form of life I knew, was ripped from me, and you were the thief that came in and stole him. He lived a long life, I was told, satisfied and a job well done. But as I heard these things, none of them gave me comfort. Silently, I began to develop distrust. You made me weary of so many things, of bonds formed with those around me, of meaningful, lasting love that would carry me through hardships, and of you, death itself, and that you could take from me in an instant what life had freely given me to experience. I was only 13 years old, but I knew you were someone I needed to always watch out for. That you would be there even while I smiled and enjoyed life, and the moments it actually made me smile. I thought we wouldn't meet again for years to come. I thought I had given enough of my heart to you when I was a child to buy my way through years of togetherness with those that I loved. I thought my heartache was payment enough. But you had other plans. September 6th, 2020. The eldest of my grandfather's children, his only baby girl, was taken. You started with a queen. I must tell you, and her death hit me hard. My auntie was the most thoughtful, caring, most, even if I don't have my life together, I'm going to look out for you, most amazing woman I have ever known. She was loud, boisterous, fun-loving, but would teach you a well-needed lesson. She was the oldest of all boys, so she was tough. Yet, even she was no match for you and your exploits. You took her from us and never looked back. June 27th, 2021. I learned my first lesson on how unfair you could be. My 12-year-old cousin was snatched away so fast by you. None of us seen it coming. For the first time in my life, I saw a mother so broken by her grief she could barely speak. A father so lost without his son he could barely stand before the casket that held him and say goodbye. But most of all, your grim visit showed me that no matter how much I loved my children, or tried to protect them from the harsh realities of the life, when it really mattered, my love couldn't save them from you. No amount of protecting them in the world would keep them from your grasp when you decided to whisk through my life and take them or someone else I love. November 1st, 2022. You sought me out in the worst of ways. You knew all too well my fears and panic over the remote possibility of me losing one of my children. Knew all too well that it would destroy me. Opening the door to my daughter's room that day, I walked into my nightmare, made my reality. Death, you take many a soul, every night, always there to absorb the essence of those we lose. So I know you heard my whispered words in the night. I know you knew, down to the fiber of your being, my worst fear. I know you knew my truth as deep and as well as I did. So when realized, you took my daughter, another bright light that those around me, who have nothing else to offer as comfort, will say was a life gone too soon. It solidified my ill thoughts of you, that you didn't play fair, that you took every opportunity to fight dirty. My daughter, one piece of my tattered heart that I managed to birth and have walk around personified, flesh and blood. You take her, and not me. You felt, as you always do, that it was time, that she had done all she was here to do, and that again, it was a job well done, and she no longer had to face a world where depression and sadness touched her. The traumas she experienced and always took her mind to a place where I couldn't reach her would never again have her lost. Here, I have to be honest with you, Death. As much as I hate to even say your name, I am overjoyed that the ugliness of life can never reach her again. But I needed more time. 15 years will never be enough. I look for her in the moon, as I know you walked her toward it. However, I will forever say, you're unfair. She was my glue, that kid that kept us all together. She was just finding her smile, her real smile, just finding a reason beyond me, as she told me, to live her life to the fullest. You took her little sister's person, and the one she talked to all the time, her brother's game partner, whom he discovered new levels on soul caliber with, her big sister's binge show watcher, and how they could watch whole seasons together in one night, her father's favorite, and how he doted on her, her mama number two's confidant, and how she helped her realize it was okay to love herself. You took my partner in crime, my me and you against it all, if you will, the one who would make me smile even when the world sought out my tears. Shame on you. In losing her, I lost myself, and I have no one else to blame but you. How dare you take my child from me? Have you not taken enough in your time with me? From your time with everyone? From the unexpectant parents who should never have to bury their children, or the children you've orphaned? Has your roster not been filled with mothers and fathers, beloved aunts or favorite uncles? My daughter's name was too pure to be added to your list, and as the world moved on, going back to the daily hustle and bustle, I'm here stuck in the moment. You ripped my sanity to shreds, and in the far reaches of my mind, I can hear the echoes of your laughter. And I know you feel pleasure in the grief you leave in your wake. That is when all the "I'm here if you need me's" or the "call me any times" slow down, and the quiet nights last longer than you ever imagined they could last. I always come back to you. I think about how you have visited me so many times just to destroy my peace and disrupt my every day. The day you took my daughter, you took a piece of me too, and you have left me forever, grasping at the dark threads of your coattails, trying to hold on to the part of me you are trying to take. My grip constantly slipping, but I can't let go. To let go of you would mean I lose my grasp on her. The only thing that pulled me through was my support system that surrounded me and helped me recover from your violent breeze of a visit. Your homecomings always come with tears and loss. I'm finally coming to realize. August 11th, 2023. You paid me a visit once again, but this time I expected you. The cancer that ravished my uncle's body and had him giving up on life were signs that alerted me. You weren't far behind. Out of the 7 uncles I have, he was my favorite. When I came out and introduced the family to my now wife, he was the one who protected me from judgment and harsh words. Any problem with me had to go through him first, and he accepted me even before my father told me he loved me still. We could talk about anything, and we did. We talked about religion, life, politics, love, relationships, and more. There was never any judgment. My whole life, he loved me for me. Yet again, you decided we had enough of the mighty presence he exuded, and you snuffed his light out after a long, hard-fought battle. The only solace I take in his passing is that he no longer has to go through that pain. And I suppose, deep down, if I'm honest, I should thank you for that. But that's where my thanks for you ends. Death. If you're still with me, I promise I'll tell you why I had the honor for 39 years to have a man in my life who stood through it all. A man who, no matter what the test that was thrown at him, he found a way to make it work. How he stood tall against adversity. Who made sure he built and had the foundation to bring to any table. A man who showed up whenever called upon. Who had so much wisdom that he imparted, whether you wanted him to or not, and always did it with love. And it was exactly what you needed to hear. I had the pleasure of calling this man my father. When I seen him, when he lost his own father, I watched him put his grief to the side to stand tall for his sister and brothers. How I seen him tuck his fear of you, death, and stand in the place you had just removed his father from and lead his family. When I seen this, I seen a mighty, strong man that stood against it all, including you, to make a way for his entire family. Not just his children, but for his brothers, wife, and anyone he came into contact with. He exuded strength in a way that made even you, death, stand still, if only for a while. For as you always do, you creeped and snaked your way in and preyed on most anyone's worst fear, losing the ones they love. You always find a way to strike when our defenses are down and our hearts are at their fullest. My father's strength is what I always leaned on, what I drew from. When I was weak, he poured his strength into me, even if he didn't know it. Whenever I called for him, he showed up, no questions asked. It was this example he set for me that allows me to show up for my children in the same way. When I needed my father, he was more to me than anyone could ever be. Yet the smile that man brought to my face shined too bright for you to know that he was one of the main reasons I survived. You selfishly taking my daughter from me. To know he poured so much life into me, even though you had tried your hardest to break me. To know that I no longer have that strength to call upon has broken me in a way I never knew a person could break. I see you relish in the pain you cause as you unfairly take the children of strangers, mothers who have lost their young ones, just like me. You make me know them in a way I never would understand, unless I too, like them, have you as a friend. We know you're toxic, but we're stuck with you, attached for the rest of our lives. I never wanted to know them, or you like this. The next year, I began to unbend myself, for what had been meant to destroy me didn't, although it definitely bent me almost to my breaking point. I became complacent and comfortable, taking for granted phone calls and visits with those I held dear, thinking I had those moments in abundance. I became forgetful of the power and pain you wielded so freely and without favorites, because I hadn't seen you for over 365 days. I relaxed enough to think, I can finally breathe. It hurts, and it's labored, and feel like needles poke me with every intake, but I can take a breath, and it feels like I never have before. 2024 for me was a year of realization, reckoning, redirection, and remembrance. And I must admit, the embedded hate I constantly feel for you, the fear of you that I always have on the back burner of my mind, took a back seat to my goals and achievements, and my planning to make things better for me and my family, and do them to honor my daughter's memory. It was a time for promises made and kept, to do better for her than I had been doing in the time since she'd been gone. For I had lost myself for a long time because of your thievery. When I lost her, I lost a large part of who I was, and I spent months on an alcoholic whirlwind. It was my father who finally broke through my hazy merry-go-round with his love and understanding and words of wisdom and support. I'm 39, and I still have yet to make a single decision without him. His opinion has always held a heavy weight in what I decide to do, no matter how big or small the decision. To you, however, my decisions are irrelevant and null in void. For you decided, once again, that I'd had enough. And when you decide things, your decisions come with such finality. I'm starting to understand that you see our fears and they empower you. You made me realize, in real time, one of my worst fears. And yet, not even a full 3 years from the date I lost my baby, and you took the air form my lungs, you're still searching the inner reaches of my being for more, saying gleefully to yourself, who else is she scared of losing that I can take and watch how she crumbles? On January 27th, 2025, my pillar of strength, my Papachu, my Superman, breathed his last breath. He kissed my mother on her cheek, told her he loved her, waited until he was alone with you, and followed you onto the abyss. How can he be gone? He's Superman. I assume you were his kryptonite. He knew he was close and felt you hovering, but he knew all too well our fear of losing someone else, and that fear of you hurting us again kept him quiet. You stole his voice, and he couldn't let us know his true pain, although I didn't think I would see you again for years to come. When I felt you this time around, you were like a fragrance in the air, that I recognized instantly. I hate that you are so familiar to me. You took my daddy. How could you? When I got the call carrying the worst news I could hear, I knew it was because of you, before a word was spoken. You, death, have left me truly on my own in this world, with this constant, pulsing, alive, reverberating fear of your next coming, and who you will take this time. I don't even know if I fear you anymore. More so, I now expect you to unexpectedly, without any preparation on my part, will float through my life and etch notches in me as if I were a wall measuring the continued growth of a child. You have shattered my already broken heart into a million pieces, and all I can manage is this plea, death. I plead with you. Let us once again become strangers. Let us become so distant. The thought of remembrance between us is alien. I want to know you no more. Flee from me, and touch not any more of those I love. I have given enough of my heart as payment for the bonds I've created, and you have severed. Please sail away on the ocean of tears. You have forced me to cry and never return to me. Signed, your well-known, but very reluctant and unwilling friend, Khalees. Thank you for being here to listen with me. Let's enjoy the new story together. Two monsters, Anatolius's home had been destroyed. Apart from the crackling of fires, still eagerly munching at the dregs of what used to be beautiful greenery, the island was silent. Anatolius might not have noticed the army behind him, were he marching on an adjacent kingdom. This kingdom, his kingdom, had been razed. Every home they passed was either a pile of ashes or the blackened husk of a stone wall. Anatolius pressed on. Nepheli had to be okay. She'd been alone with Anacreon for 6 years. He still had to apologize for that. He remembered the linen sheets she'd wrapped around their boy as she carried him. The boy with her blue eyes and the golden hair Anatolius himself had been born with. Hair that would by now be darkening to a soft brown. He'd been looking forward to catch up with them, with the goings-on of the kingdom, with the childhood he'd missed out on. As they walked through the town, he heard several of his men cry out. The sounds of weapons dropping to the stone roads, and the sound of feet racing off. Several corpses dotted the paths. Most were burned beyond recognition, but a few wore helms bearing a crest that had been melted by the heat. None of his men, of course. Some army that had sacked the place, but some didn't wear armor. Anatolius was trying not to think about that. He had to see to Nepheli first. He had to. His sandal hit an uneven patch of stone in the path, and he stopped. Behind him, the sounds of his army rustled to a stop. No, he stumbled forward, the dying light of the day casting long shadows that blended with the soot-blackened stone, as if to trick him into thinking that it was supposed to look like this. The courtyard was in disarray. The once beautiful gardens that Nephili had so meticulously tended to were reduced to cinders. The 2 cypress trees at its entrance, little more than stumps. A bench lay in a heap of broken stone. The doors, at first glance, were open, though taking another trembling step forward, Anatolius realized there was no door in the hollow mouth leading into what was once his home. "Sir," Anatolius jumped. He'd thought most of the men had run off, seeing to their own homes. But Theodoros stood behind him, standing to attention. His eyes were hard, as if he were pretending to be blind to the destruction. Theodoros had fled his home, a country to the south, one with gods like Niam and Anansi, rather than Zeus and Hermes. He remembered helping the man out of a shipwreck when they were boys, making a comment about being surprised he'd survived the wrath of Charybdis, and realizing the boy couldn't understand his words. He didn't even have the language to tell Anatolius his name. Theodoros was the name they'd given him in Liu, and the name that had stuck. Apart from Anatolius, he didn't really have a family here. "Theo," he said, stepping forward. He'd intended to make it a long, confident stride, but his foot skidded in the ash and rubble. "You don't have to see this. I must," he said. His eyes grew soft as he regarded his king. "If only to keep you on your feet." Anatolius frowned at him, then took a deep breath and nodded. He ducked into the doorway. The humble palace was illuminated by a wide hole in the wall, breaching through the ceiling of the upper floor. The smell of charred flesh, stale after days of abandonment, still hung faintly in the air. Anatolius pulled up his cloak to cover his nose. "There could be survivors," he said doubtfully. "Check the cellars. Someone could have hidden there from the fire. I'll go check my bedchambers." Theodoros opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again, giving his king a nod. He ducked into the kitchen and disappeared from view. Anatolius put one foot on the bottom step, taking a deep breath to steel himself, regretting it immediately as the odors seemed to coagulate in his nostrils. He readjusted his cloak about his nose and headed up the stairs, dreading what he'd find at the top. They could still live, he tried to reassure himself. If they're not up here, Theo might find them in the cellar. Perhaps Anacreon was hiding between the wine barrels when they came. He paused on the steps. They? Who was they? The city had been burnt to the ground intentionally. There were dead soldiers among the townspeople. But who on earth would have this big a problem with him? He almost turned around to go find one of those dead soldiers and examine the corpse more thoroughly. But he shook his head and took another step up. "Don't distract yourself," as his words echoed in the still air. he froze. The sound of something rustling in the rooms overhead were distinct now. A scuttling of feet and fabric. Someone was here. One hand on the hilt of his xiphus, he charged up the stairs. It could be Nepheli, but it could be someone else entirely. He threw his shoulder through the remains of the door, barging into his rooms amid a shower of soot. He then froze. His chambers, now a single room with the walls burned or knocked over, were destroyed. He shook his head, refusing to let himself be distracted by the destruction, and turned to the bed. Their bed. His blood ran cold. Nepheli, thin and gaunt, staring at him in disbelief and fear, lay in the bed. At first, he thought she must be tied there, with how little she moved. But as she lifted her trembling hand, he realized she was simply too weak. With effort, she outstretched a finger to point at him. No, not at him. Behind him, he spun in one fluid motion, drawing his sword. Initially, he saw nothing but the darkened corner of the room, blackened by shadows and soot. Then a low, dark chuckle echoed, and two glowing pinpricks of red appeared from the void. And here I was, half expecting her to die before you arrived, said a smooth voice, a shape separating itself from the shadows and resolving into a strange figure. It stepped forward, some kind of humanoid relative of Chimera, Anatolius thought. Its legs were smooth, dark red, scaled things, talons clinking on the stone floor between the tattered remnants of a pelt, the long, thin end of a reptilian tail whipped around. The figure's face remained in shadow, apart from its eyes, but Anatolius could just make out the shape of their head, adorned with wicked horns that swept back and arched up into points like some cruel wave. "Who are you?" he demanded in horror. "Not what?" The being chuckled, bringing a hand up to rest on their hip. It had those same dark red scales, same hooked black talons, clashing with the clean white of the creature's exomus. Most people ask me, what? I've had many of these conversations, King. Yet you're the first to ask after my identity first. I'll commend you on that. I know what you are. You're a monster. You brought your army here to destroy my people, and I will know why. Speak. The figure, infuriatingly, remained still. Another chuckle rumbling in their chest. Anatolius could practically hear Nepheli's bones vibrating as she trembled in fear or exhaustion, perhaps both. What had this thing done to her? "It's quite close to dark," they said, drawing his attention back. "Are you certain you want to strike now? What's that supposed to mean?" he shot back. One more dark chuckle. One more tremulous heartbeat. The sun was barely a blood-stained sliver cresting the windowsill. Then it was gone, the light dying from the room. The figure swept toward him. Only his reflexes saved him, his foot swinging out as he pivoted, trying to catch the creature unawares. The first thing Anatolius had learned in war was that a soldier's sword wasn't his only weapon. An instant later, he was staring at the ceiling through star-clouded eyes, wheezing for breath. The creature's tail tip unwound from his ankle, and the thing stepped over to look down at him. A silver grin cracking the violet dusk light. "You should have gotten her and gotten out," they said, and lunged down at him. Cat. Pain greeted him as he woke. Head muddled, he groaned, reaching up to rub at a crick in his neck. A hand grabbed his wrist, and he cursed under his breath. "That thing, let go!" The words, though attempted to be forceful, came out as a pained hiss. He glared up at the figure above him, reaching for his sword. A moment later, he realized it wasn't the thing from earlier, but a more familiar face. Theodoros. Anatolius relaxed. What happened? Theodoros loosened his grip on his wrist, readjusting to help Anatolius sit up. There was a pain in his eyes, Anatolius realized. Or was it guilt? He shook his head to clear it, feeling a lot like he was nursing a hangover without having drunk the wine. "I am sorry, Your Majesty." Anatolius looked around the room. It was still in the same disheveled state as before, only now a huddled mass lay on the ground beside him. The creature, he realized. Its tail was still coiled lightly around his leg, but it lay in a puddle of blood. And Anatolius realized with shock that the sword whose handle he'd been reaching for was buried in its chest. Looking over the thing now, it seemed so much smaller, so much less imposing. He could see its face clearly now. Nearly human, but for a dusting of crimson scales across its cheeks. Had they been that bright before? Or had he been imagining it in the distorting shadows of the encroaching night that collected in patches around the outside corners of its hollow silver eyes, framing its face? It was a woman, too. More sets of horns studding her jawline, almost like facial hair. Her mouth hung open, revealing a set of fangs whose tips were dipped in blood. Anatolius reached up again, and this time Theodoros didn't stop him as he reached for that crick in his neck. No, not a crick, he realized, hissing in pain as his fingertips brushed a set of puncture wounds. "This thing, what is it?" he asked as he dropped his hand, looking up at his friend. Theodoros shook his head. He didn't know. Anatolius stood, feeling dizzy and weak as he got to his feet. He looked over to the bed, toward the unmoving lump under the sheets. Theodoros got up. But if his intent was to help, he moved too late. As Anatolius stumbled to the side of the bed and fell to his knees beside it. His wife, her once beautiful face now sunken in and bloodless, stared with dead eyes back at him. He reached up with trembling hands, one hand cupping her cheek, the other reaching for her hand. It was still outstretched, with the pointer finger out. She must have used the last of her strength to try and warn me, he thought, leaning up to kiss her forehead as tears collected in his eyes. Without looking up, he said, "Where is my son?" Theodoros was silent for a long moment. "I found him in the cellars," he finally said. "Dead? The smoke must have killed him." Theodoros usually sounded stern. Even in battle, he'd never cracked. But he loved Anatolius's family, just as much as he himself did. And now, their loss had broken something in him. If the pain in his voice was anything to go by, Anatolius took a deep breath, then stood, still holding his wife's hand. The night before he'd left for war, he'd promised to return. He'd promised to her worried tears that she'd see him again. That promise had been fulfilled, but it felt hollow now. A sudden rage seized him. He dropped her hand. Then, despite his weakness, he stormed to the side of the creature who had attacked him. The thing that had ransacked his kingdom, destroyed his home, murdered his people and his family. He reached out and ripped the sword from her chest, scoring it down her belly to upend her innards onto his floor. "How dare you!" he snarled. Blood arced as he swung the blade down, then sprayed out as he drove the blade into the dead monster again. "How dare you! How dare you! You God's damned rat! You disgusting wretch! I was loyal to the gods. I commanded an army. I destroyed my enemy. How dare you spit in my face like this?" With each heartbeat, he swung the sword again and again and again. Blood drenched the floor, splattered the walls, and soaked up the ash from the fire, coating his clothing in sprays of red and black. A bit of it got in his eyes, his mouth, as he screamed his defiance. He didn't care, even as he tasted it going down. He didn't stop until the body was unrecognizable. Chunks of meat decorated with once fine fabric and putrid viscera. Even then, he didn't want to stop. But his fatigued muscles gave out, his arms refusing to lift the blade. He glared at the thing, the only bit of it still vaguely intact, its mouth, still agape. Then that mouth closed and smiled at him. "So you accept," came a voice, though the lips didn't move further. He blinked, about to turn to Theodoros to ask if he'd heard it too, then froze. Anatolius was no longer in his room. He looked around, finding a field devoid of color. He spun sluggishly, wondering if he'd threat of exhaustion. if he was about to be approached by Karen and guided by Fairy to join his family. For a moment, he hoped so. Then a sound echoed. A footstep. A figure did approach him, but not the figure of the god he expected. A familiar figure, with lizard's legs and a thin, whip-like tail. He hissed and crouched down, sword ready, and lunged forward with a strength he thought had abandoned him. "Wrong way, King," said the woman's voice. Snidely, he whirled on her, slashing once more with his blade. Again, her voice was behind him, though this time it was an exasperated sigh. "Maybe I won't tell you what you've done to yourself. It's more fun to imagine your despair from Tartarus. Anyway," he turned, though this time confusion stayed his hand. "What I've done to myself?" The creature gave him a flat look, clearly disappointed. "Yes. You could have let me kill you. I came to your kingdom, destroyed it, slowly drained your wife, and let your son choke on his own death in the cellar. And you didn't bother to ask me why. I'm insulted, Your Majesty." He curled his lip. "Why would I want to know why? You deserve death." "Oh, I'm already dead. Good job on that, too. Though if you'd been a little quicker, you might have escaped." "What?" He paused. She'd opened her mouth, tongue tracing his blood off her fangs. He reached up, finding the wound she'd given him, though in this strange place, touching the area didn't hurt. "I've made you immortal," she said smugly, hands on her hips. "That wasn't my goal, though. I am very old, Anatolius. I was hoping to die. I was just glad for a little fuss on my way out." "Why seek me out for that?" he demanded, hand still on the wound, as if by covering it, he could avoid the immortality she promised. Something told him it wasn't the immortality he might have wanted. "I've heard of the wars you Greeks wage," she said conversationally. Lifting one hand from her hip, she cupped the air, and Anatolius jumped back as a lithe flame danced in her palm. "I carry a power to make them more destructive, as made evident by what I did to your home. The power of one creature's rage. I did not bring those soldiers, Anatolius. That was one of your allies, sending their army to defend your people. They failed. You..." His mouth went dry. "You did all this on your own?" She grinned, crooking her fingers around the flame in her hand. Upon closer inspection, that flame was bigger than it appeared, bright orange, bleeding into a pinkish hue, and then darkening to black as they curled around her cruel grin. "That was my power, Anatolius, and now it's yours." She swept forward soundlessly. Then, suddenly, her hand was on his chest, the tips of her claws digging into his flesh and caging the flame against his skin. He screamed, but before he could swing his sword again, she'd pressed it into his chest, everything became blinding pain. The fire seemed to consume his heart, then flood through him, along the paths of his veins, setting him alight. That strange flame morphed him into a human-shaped bonfire. Everything was flame. All he knew, everything he'd ever known, was that flame. It burned away every bit of him, leaving a smoldering hunk of coal in his place. Within himself, he saw two faces. His wife, smiling at him, her dazzling beam burning away the memory of her dead in her bed. That of a young boy, older than he'd known his son, but undoubtedly him all the same, grinning playfully up at him through the mess of curls on his head. Though made of that flame, he reached out, pulling the both of them into an embrace. When he woke again, once more looking up at his own ash and blood-flecked ceiling, once more with Theodorus's face looking with concern down at him. There were tears in his eyes. Anatolius's home had been destroyed, so today's story has come to an end. Or perhaps it never really ended. There are mysteries still there, questions still unanswered, and sometimes things that seem to only exist in stories can creep into reality in unexpected ways. Are you sure that when you turn off the sound, everything around you will still be normal as before? Or is there something watching you? Either way, always remember that these are just stories, or at least we want to believe that they are. If you like moments of suspense, tension, and breathlessness, don't forget to follow me so you don't miss the next stories. And next time, when you come back, make sure you are ready, because what awaits you may be even scarier than you thought. See you again if you still have the courage to continue listening.